The sun beat down on Camp Concordia in Kansas during the hot afternoon of August 1944. From the window of her barracks, Oberfeldwebel Helga Richter observed the American guards engaged in a strange culinary ritual. For the past 3 weeks since her capture, this was the most unusual sight yet. They were grilling whole ears of corn, still wrapped in their green husks, over large outdoor grills. The Americans handled the yellow kernels with a reverence that Germans typically saved for fine cuts of meat. Can you believe it? "They are cooking food for pigs," she remarked to Liesel Mann, who had been a communications officer in the Luftwaffe. Liesel was standing right next to her. "Look at them, grilling corn as if it's some kind of treasure, not something you feed to swine." Liesel let out a laugh, but the sound was hollow and filled with unease. Their entire experience in American captivity had challenged the official briefings they received about the enemy's cruelty. The barracks were clean, the food was sufficient, and their treatment was always respectful. It all pointed to a level of wealth that German propaganda never mentioned. This bizarre corn ritual, however, seemed to finally prove their long-held beliefs about the Americans' lack of proper taste. "Back home in Germany," Helga added, "corn is for livestock. During the worst food shortages, only the truly desperate would eat it. Even then, we had to grind it into a meal just to make the taste bearable." Through the glass, they saw Sergeant Miller showing his grilling method to a few curious prisoners who had signed up for kitchen work. He slowly rotated the corn, his limited German barely enough to explain the process as the outer husks turned black and steam puffed out. "Miss Richter, Miss Mann," a voice called from the door. It was Corporal Sarah Mitchell. "You are both invited to our monthly cultural exchange dinner. The theme for tonight is American summer food." She added, "Attendance isn't mandatory, but the kitchen staff made something special." "Will there be actual food there?" Helga shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or will it be more animal feed presented as a human meal?" Corporal Mitchell's face stayed perfectly neutral, but a flicker in her eyes suggested she was used to such comments. "You'll have to come and see for yourself. Dinner starts at 6 o'clock in the recreation hall." After Mitchell walked away, Liesel looked at Helga with a worried expression. "Should we actually go?" "I don't want to be rude, but I refuse to eat pig feed just to be polite." "We will go," Helga announced with finality, if for no other reason than to gather more stories about strange American customs to report when we finally go home. Imagine telling our families they serve grilled corn to people. Nobody will believe us. That night, 37 German female prisoners of war filed into the recreation hall. The American staff had set up an impressive cooking demonstration outside. The heat from the grills was intense, and the air was filled with the smell of roasting corn. It wasn't the damp, earthy smell Helga expected from animal feed. Instead, it was surprisingly sweet, with a hint of nuts. "Ladies," Sergeant Miller announced in slow, deliberate German, "tonight we want to share an American tradition with you. This is sweet corn, picked fresh this morning from local Kansas farms. We grill it with butter and salt." He smiled. "This is the taste of summer in America. We eat this at family parties and community events. It is a simple joy." Helga looked at the other women. Their faces all showed the same thought. The Americans actually celebrated their culture by eating food meant for pigs. It seemed to confirm every story they had ever been told about the vast cultural gap between them and their unsophisticated captors. This was a clash between their ideas of European food and what they saw as crude American habits. But then Sergeant Miller pulled a perfectly cooked ear of corn from the grill. He peeled away the blackened husk, showing the golden kernels shining with melted butter. A delicious smell filled the air, and despite her mind telling her it was disgusting, Helga felt a sudden pang of hunger. "Who wants to be the first to try?" Miller asked, holding the steaming corn out for them. The German women just stared at it. They were caught between their cultural beliefs and a real curiosity to see if the Americans were actually serious about eating something they only used as animal feed. It wasn't exactly a voluntary decision. Helga found herself pushed to the front by the other prisoners. As the highest-ranking officer, she was expected to test this potentially strange American food first. She stood in front of Sergeant Miller, eyeing the grilled corn with the same caution she would give an unexploded bomb. "You just bite the kernels right off the cob," Miller explained. He took a bite from his own piece of corn to show her. "The butter and salt bring out the natural sweetness." "Sweetness?" Helga repeated. "Corn is not sweet. It's a bland, starchy food for animals." "Field corn is," Miller calmly agreed, speaking in a patient voice that suggested he had explained this before. That is what you feed your animals. This, however, is sweet corn. It is a totally different type, grown only for people to eat. Americans have been perfecting it for more than 100 years. This explanation was meaningless to Helga. She had never even thought that there could be different kinds of corn beyond the one used for livestock in Germany. She took the ear of corn he offered. It was still hot, and melted butter dripped down the sides in golden streams. For Germany, she mumbled with a sarcastic tone, and then took a bite, looking like someone forced to do a terrible task. The burst of flavor was a complete shock. It was sweet, truly as sweet as a summer fruit. It was also buttery and had a light smoky taste from the grill. The texture was soft and tender, not tough and starchy like the animal feed she knew. The salt did not hide the corn's natural flavor, but made it better, creating a combination of tastes she had never known. She chewed her bite slowly, knowing that the eyes of every other German prisoner were locked on her. Her face must have given away her shock because Liesel immediately walked up to her. "Is it really that good?" Liesel asked with doubt in her voice. "It is." Helga searched for the right words to describe it. "It is not what I thought it would be. It is actually pleasant." "Pleasant?" Liesel quickly took an ear of corn from Miller's tray. She bit into it with a look of clear distrust, but then her eyes went wide with the exact same shock Helga had felt. "My God," she said. "This tastes nothing like the corn we give to the pigs." In just a few minutes, all 37 German prisoners were eating the grilled corn. Their faces showed a mix of surprise and genuine enjoyment. The recreation hall was soon filled with the sound of biting into corn cobs, quiet gasps of discovery, and hushed, confused conversations. They couldn't understand how the Americans had turned simple animal feed into something so delicious. Before we see how this one simple ear of corn would completely change what these German prisoners thought about America. We'd love to know where you are in the world as you join us for these amazing stories where cultural ideas about food meet a delicious truth. Please drop your location in the comments section below, as we always enjoy connecting with our viewers from every corner of the globe. After she had already finished her second ear of corn, Helga walked over to Sergeant Miller. "I don't understand," she said. "How did you get food for animals to taste this good?" "We didn't do anything to it," Miller answered her. "This is just the natural taste of sweet corn when you pick it fresh and cook it properly. It tastes this way when you treat it like real food instead of just calling it animal feed." He added, "People in America were eating corn like this long before this country was even founded." "But the corn in Germany," Helga started to say. "The corn you know in Germany is field corn," Miller gently cut in. "That type was bred to be turned into flour, meal, or to feed animals. You never tasted sweet corn because the tradition of growing it for food simply doesn't exist there." That simple observation hit Helga harder than she wanted to show. It made her wonder, how many other types of foods or traditions or new ideas had Germany simply ignored without ever giving them a fair chance? The discovery of sweet corn led to many deep conversations among the German prisoners over the next few weeks. They talked about food, about culture, and about all the wrong ideas they had when they were captured. Helga was soon given a new duty in the camp's garden. There, the American staff taught the prisoners about different plants and farming methods that were about growing better tasting food, not just more of it. "In this part of the garden, we have 3 different types of corn," Corporal Peterson explained. He was giving a tour to Helga and 5 other prisoners. "That's field corn for animal feed and flour. This is sweet corn for people to eat directly. And this one is popcorn, which we eat as a snack." "A snack food?" Helga questioned. "You have a type of corn that is grown only for snacking?" "We have dozens of types for all sorts of different uses," Peterson corrected her gently. "Americans are very serious about corn. It's a crop that is native to our land, and we have been improving it for thousands of years. The corn that you know is only a very small piece of a much bigger story." As they continued through the garden, Peterson pointed out the differences. The field corn had hard, starchy kernels, which were perfect for grinding. The sweet corn had more sugar and a softer texture, making it great for eating fresh. The popcorn had a special kind of kernel with a hard shell that would burst open when it was heated. Each type was a product of advanced farming that the Germans never explored, all because they thought corn was not as good as wheat or potatoes. "In Germany," Helga confessed, "we always thought corn was a poor person's food. We believed Americans only ate it because you hadn't grown proper European crops. And yet," Peterson replied, without any hint of judgment in his voice. Corn is one of the best crops ever. It produces more food than wheat, can be used in more ways, and it survives better in dry weather. We didn't grow corn because we had no other choice. We grew it because we knew how valuable it was. Later that evening, Helga was on kitchen duty, learning American cooking styles. She worked with a Sergeant Williams who showed her how to prepare corn in many ways. They grilled it and boiled it. They cut the kernels off the cob and cooked them with butter. They even baked the corn into muffins and bread. Every new dish showed her just how useful this vegetable could be. "You know, my grandmother was from Germany," Williams said casually. "My grandmother was from Germany," Sergeant Williams mentioned, as he showed Helga how to cut kernels from the cob. When she first came to America, she refused to eat corn. She said it was pig food and beneath her. "What made her change her mind?" Helga asked. "My grandfather took her to a picnic," he explained. "She was hungry, the corn smelled wonderful, and she finally tried it. After that, she always said you can't judge something based on old beliefs. You have to try it with an open mind." The story felt familiar to Helga. She had done the exact same thing. "Sergeant Williams," she asked quietly, "how many other things have we Germans been wrong about?" Williams stopped his work and thought for a moment. "That's a question you have to answer for yourself," he said. "But in my experience, the ones who truly succeed are those who are willing to learn from others instead of assuming they know everything." In the following weeks, Helga studied American corn culture. She learned that it was the foundation of their entire system, used not just for food, but for industry and fuel. "We called it animal feed," she told the other prisoners one evening, "while they built a civilization on it." "So, you're saying we should have eaten more corn?" Liesel asked with a small smile. "I'm saying," Helga replied, "we shouldn't have assumed their choices were ignorant. We just didn't understand." When September arrived, the prisoners received a surprising invitation. They would be allowed to work on local Kansas farms to help with the corn harvest and learn new farming methods. The host families were all German-American and had specifically asked for prisoners who wanted to learn. Helga, along with 15 other women, volunteered immediately. 2 days later, she was riding in a truck towards the Schmidt farm. There, the Schmidt family, who were descendants of German immigrants, welcomed the prisoners with a warmth that none of them had expected. Mrs. Schmidt welcomed Helga warmly in German, though she had a strong American accent. The hospitality, however, felt very German. Over coffee and fresh cornbread, she shared a familiar story. "My great-grandfather came from Bavaria," she said. "For his first year here, he refused to eat corn, calling it pig food. Eventually, he learned that American corn was different, and it became his favorite." "That seems to be a common story," Helga noted. "Because it's true," Mr. Schmidt added. "The immigrants who succeeded were the ones who learned to appreciate what this new land offered instead of holding on to old ideas." The next morning, Helga's farming education began. The Schmidt's cornfields were vast and perfectly organized, with mechanical harvesters working efficiently. Mr. Schmidt showed her the different sections. "This is field corn for animal feed," he explained. "That section is sweet corn for people to eat. Each one needs to be grown and harvested differently. In Germany, we don't have the luxury of specializing like this," Helga said. "It's not a luxury, it's efficiency," Mr. Schmidt corrected her gently. "By growing the right corn for the right purpose, we get better results for everything." Throughout the day, Helga learned about crop rotation, irrigation, and other advanced techniques. It all explained the incredible abundance of American farms. "You feed your people better than we do," Helga said to Mrs. Schmidt during their lunch break. "Not because your land is better, but because your systems are." "Perhaps," Mrs. Schmidt replied. "Or maybe we just asked a different question. Instead of trying to make people eat what was available, we asked, how can we grow crops that people will truly want to eat?" That evening, Helga sat on the farmhouse porch, tired from the work but full of new ideas. She watched the sunset over the endless cornfields and finally understood the philosophy behind them. A focus on specialized crops, efficiency, and the amazing results that come from an open mind. "Ready for tomorrow?" Mr. Schmidt asked, joining Helga on the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Ready to learn more," Helga replied. "Everything I see here challenges something I thought I knew." Her 2-week stay on the farm completely changed how she saw America. On her last night, the Schmidts hosted a traditional corn roast to celebrate the harvest. "This is community food," Mrs. Schmidt explained as they prepared the corn. It's about sharing the pleasure of a good harvest. As the sun set, Helga watched American families gather around the grills. It felt similar to German harvest festivals, but with one key difference. The Americans were celebrating abundance, not just relief from scarcity. Miss Richter, Mr. Schmidt called out, would you like to help me show your fellow prisoners how to grill the corn? You've become quite an expert. Surprised, Helga agreed. She joined him at the grill and began demonstrating the techniques she had learned, showing the other women how to get the perfect result. 2 weeks ago, you were calling this pig food, one of the prisoners remarked. Now you're teaching us how to cook it. 2 weeks ago, I was ignorant, Helga replied honestly. I assumed that because we didn't eat sweet corn in Germany, it must be inferior. I never considered it was something we had simply failed to develop. As the evening went on, even the most skeptical prisoners had to admit that the grilled sweet corn was delicious. I don't understand, Liesel said after finishing her fourth piece. Why did we only ever have field corn in Germany? Why didn't we develop varieties like this? Helga finally knew the answer. Because we started with the assumption that corn was inferior to wheat, she explained. We never invested in it because we had already decided it wasn't worth the effort. The Americans started with a different assumption, and they got a different result. Helga realized that this simple lesson applied to more than just corn. It explained so much of what she had seen in America, from their flush toilets and ice cream to their advanced farms and endless supply of cars. It was all built on a different set of assumptions. Each new discovery challenged Helga's belief about which society was truly more advanced. When we go back to Germany, she told the other prisoners, we must tell the truth about America's strengths, not just repeat propaganda. As they prepared to leave the farm, Mrs. Schmidt gave Helga a small package. Sweet corn seeds, she said with a smile, for your garden back home. Helga took the seeds, moved by the simple gift. It was a symbol of the most important lesson she had learned. You must experience things for yourself instead of judging them based on old beliefs. Thank you, she said. I'll plant these and remember. By October, Helga had a new, unbelievable role, teaching other German prisoners how to cook with corn. Her first class was on making cornbread. This is a staple of American food, she announced to a dozen skeptical women. Bread from cornmeal? One prisoner scoffed. That sounds like desperation food. Real bread is made from wheat. Helga recognized her own past prejudice in the woman's comment. I used to think so too, she admitted. But this isn't trying to be wheat bread. It's something different and delicious in its own way. She calmly demonstrated how to mix the cornmeal with flour, eggs, and milk. Then she poured the batter into hot cast-iron skillets. The secret is the skillet, she explained, repeating the lesson she had learned from Mrs. Schmidt. It creates a crispy crust but keeps the inside moist. As the cornbread began to bake, a sweet, buttery aroma started to fill the kitchen, a smell that promised another delicious surprise. When the golden cornbread came out of the oven, its sweet, buttery smell interested even the most doubtful prisoners. Helga served it in the American style, with butter and honey. The change of opinion was immediate. Women who had sworn they would never eat corn-based food were asking for second helpings. If we knew corn could taste like this, one woman admitted, we would have treated it differently. Exactly, Helga replied. The Americans explored its potential. We just dismissed it. Helga's classes soon covered many other corn dishes, from chowder to pudding. Sergeant Miller joked one day, "You've become a real corn evangelist." I was ignorant before, Helga said honestly. Now I understand. She had learned that recognizing America's strengths didn't make her less German. It just meant facing reality. In December 1944, news from the war made it clear that Germany had lost. For Helga, it felt similar to her own journey of misunderstanding American strength. One day, she was called into an office to meet with officials from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They were already planning how to help rebuild Germany's farms after the war. For 3 hours, the officials interviewed Helga. She explained everything she had learned about the different corn varieties, the farming methods, and the American attitude of respect for the crop. They took detailed notes asking her about the climate and soil back in Germany. The key issue, one of the officials, Dr. Harrison explained, is whether Germans will accept corn as real food. We can introduce new seeds and farming methods, but the program will fail if the cultural prejudice is too strong. The prejudice is real, Helga confirmed. I had it myself. In Germany, corn means poverty because we only eat it when there is nothing else. So how do we change that belief? Dr. Harrison asked. Helga thought about her own journey. You let them taste it, she answered. You show them that sweet corn, prepared properly, isn't a poor substitute for their own food. It's just different. And different doesn't mean worse. Impressed, Dr. Harrison offered her a job after the war, helping to teach these new methods back in Germany. Just months ago, she was an enemy officer. Now, she was being asked to help rebuild her country with American knowledge. Yes, she replied instantly. We need to learn from those who succeeded where we failed. During Christmas preparations, Helga found herself teaching the prisoners how to make a sweet corn pudding for the holiday meal. My mother would never believe this, Liesel laughed, her daughter teaching German women to make American desserts in a prison camp. The conversation turned to the future. Some prisoners planned to stay in America, but Helga knew she had to go back, armed with everything she had learned. But will our people ever really accept corn? Another woman asked. Not at first, Helga admitted. But in time, Germany will need efficient crops. People will eventually learn the same lesson the Americans did. Corn has incredible advantages. Reality will win in the end. When the war in Europe ended in March 1945, preparations for the prisoners' return began. The Americans started a farming program to help rebuild Germany, and Helga found herself leading classes on corn cultivation. The most important lesson, she told the women, is to be open-minded. The Americans succeeded because they spent centuries improving corn, while we just assumed it was inferior. One of her students, Greta, worried her father would never accept the idea of sweet corn. Don't tell him about it, Helga advised. Show him. Plant it, cook it properly, and let him taste it for himself. That's what changed my mind. Before she left, Helga received a formal job offer from the U.S. government, work as a paid agricultural consultant in Munich to help rebuild. Some will call you a collaborator, Liesel warned her. Perhaps, Helga replied, but Germany needs to learn from America's success to recover. Teaching that is not betrayal, it's wisdom. The voyage home to Germany took 2 weeks. Helga kept the sweet corn seeds from the Schmidt farm packed carefully. As they neared the European coast, another woman remarked, It feels strange, bringing enemy seeds to plant in our soil. It is strange, Helga agreed, but it's also a symbol of hope. These seeds represent the need to solve problems with open minds, not old prejudice, Helga said. Arriving in Hamburg, she saw a Germany destroyed by war. But amid the ruins, she also saw a chance to rebuild with new ideas. The corn seeds were a symbol of that hope. 6 months later, Helga stood in a demonstration garden near Munich, teaching a group of skeptical German farmers, most of whom were women who had lost their husbands in the war. This is not the corn you feed to pigs, she began, holding up sweet corn seeds. This kind is for people, an old farmer interrupted her. We know corn. It is animal feed. Why should we believe this American propaganda? Helga was prepared for this. Because I once believed the same thing, she answered calmly. But I was a prisoner of war in Kansas. I worked on their farms. This is not propaganda. It is practical knowledge that I learned with my own hands. Her garden became a living experiment. She grew the sweet corn next to Germany's traditional field corn so the farmers could see the difference for themselves. Americans eat it right off the cob, she told them. But you must taste it for yourself before you judge. The real test would come at the harvest in August, when Helga planned to host a traditional American corn roast for everyone. Just as she had predicted, the corn roast in the demonstration garden was a success. The skeptical farmers tasted the grilled sweet corn, and their prejudice vanished with the first bite. This is nothing like pig feed, one exclaimed. Helga simply smiled. That's because it isn't. The success of her garden got noticed. Within a year, Helga was leading a network of experimental farms across West Germany. An American officer jokingly called her the corn evangelist, but she knew the secret was simple. Letting people taste the difference was more powerful than any argument. By 1947, sweet corn was becoming a common crop. The cultural shift had begun. 10 years later, in the summer of 1955, Helga was a respected agricultural consultant in Munich. From her office window, she could see fresh sweet corn being sold at the local market, a sight that would have been unimaginable a decade earlier. That day, she was meeting with officials from the Ministry of Agriculture to discuss expanding corn cultivation into East Germany. She stood before the government officials, some of whom she recognized from her very first, skeptical audience. 10 years ago, she began, I was a prisoner of war in Kansas, laughing at Americans for eating what I called animal feed. Today, I am asking you to make corn a foundational crop for Germany's future. My story is proof of the lesson we all need to learn. We must approach our problems with open minds, not old prejudice. She then presented her data, a decade of proof that the American methods worked in German soil. The farmers who once called it pig feed, she concluded, now recognize its true value. After the meeting, Helga walked through a Munich market and smiled as she saw fresh corn for sale. Still think it's animal feed? A familiar voice asked. It was Mrs. Schmidt visiting from Kansas. Helga hugged her old mentor. I think it's whatever you have the vision to make it, she replied. That night, Helga hosted a dinner for Liesel and other former prisoners. She served a mix of German and American food, including corn pudding alongside traditional schnitzel. My mother still thinks the Americans brainwashed me, Liesel joked. In a way they did, Helga laughed. They brainwashed me out of my prejudice. They forced me to question everything I thought was true. She raised her glass for a toast. To the corn, she said. The perfect teacher. It was so simple, yet it proved all our assumptions wrong. It taught us to question everything and to learn from our former enemies. It showed us that what we once called pig feed was actually a strength we never knew we were missing. Later that night, as her guests left, Helga stood by her window, looking out at the new buildings of Munich. The city, like her own mind, was being rebuilt with help and lessons from the very nation that had defeated them. In her refrigerator, she had fresh corn for the morning, and in her heart, a lasting gratitude for the American farm family who had patiently taught a prisoner that the best lessons often come from tasting what you once mocked. The corn had been more than food. It was a bridge between enemies, a lesson in humility, and proof that the strongest nations are built by seeing potential where others see none. Even now, every bite of sweet corn took her back to that moment in Camp Concordia. It was the taste that made her realize everything I believed was wrong, and it sparked the question that changed her life. What else am I wrong about? It was that simple question, born from a taste of corn, that had guided 10 years of her work and helped put her nation back on its feet.